Mentioned before, Queensland Government got a shocking report card today. If it was a kid, you'd get them to think about repeating whatever year of school that they had just gone through. It was the whole box and dice about integrity issues. A man who's spoken about them many times, both as a shadow minister and now leader of the LNP. An alternative premier is none other than David Crucifulli, who joins us from Queensland. David, what about the premier today? Couldn't possibly talk about this today because she had emergency dental work, but she still was at work. Talk about dog ate your homework stuff. This report is an absolute shocker, and she can put it off for a day, 2 days or 2 weeks. This is the ultimate red line that her government has brought about that makes it one of the worst in Queensland's history.
It's a damning report, Paul, and it actually strengthens our calls for a Royal Commission because it identifies so many crimes, but what it doesn't do is identify the culprit. But if you look at it, it's scathing in every aspect. Labor lobbyists who are getting their pound of flesh after operating in a taxpayer-funded building. They've now been given the keys to the palace. Young ministerial staffers walking around barking orders. A culture of a public service bullied and intimidated. It really is for damning reading. And you're right, she can put it off 24 hours, but tomorrow is her day of reckoning. And already we've heard ministers who are just going around saying, oh, we're going to implement it lock, stock and barrel, to use a famous phrase from another time. You can say that, but that needs to come with action. So when and how? And if you do want to implement lock, stock and barrel, what about things like commercial in confidence that he's addressed? What's the cost of Wellcamp, that quarantine facility? So if the Premier stands up tomorrow morning at 9 a.m, if she doesn't name the cost of Wellcamp, you know that this is nothing more than a political game for them. And until they front up and lead that change, I see this as nothing more than lip service from a third-term government in the death throes.
Yeah, I know you just mentioned an example, but was there a case study that particularly just, even as somebody who's been watching them like a hawk, it even made your mouth drop?
Paul, there was one line in it that I just read over and over again, and to the credit of the author, he says that there is a toxic culture that stems from the top. Now, that makes for sobering reading, because I got asked today, somebody said, well, why does this matter? Why should this matter to people? Well, I always talk about when governments give up on integrity, they give up on governing for you. But think of the things that I've always spoken about. A dysfunctional health system where AMBOs are ramped because the hospital's so full. Law and order out of control because there's not enough coppers and weak laws. And housing where you've got working people living out of tents at the moment. Well, in the last 7 years, there's been 3 health ministers, 3 police ministers, 3 housing ministers, but there's been one common theme, one premier. And for this report to specifically say a rotten culture that stems from the top, that is damning. And unless the premier can clearly articulate how she's going to do things and what changes are going to be made right across the board, well then she's not the person to lead the reform of a rotten culture that she has created.
But also, I think that when you talk about that as well, that it's best crystallised and symbolised by the leader. But I think that it's the way that the ministers interact with the key bureaucrats, how the key bureaucrats interact with them. The top is basically, I don't know what floor it is, but whatever the executive level of Parliament House is.
Yeah, you're right, Paul, and some interesting reading came in the form of how they treat the RTI process. So you've got a culture where public servants aren't putting things in writing and they're scared because they're worried about how that looks for their political masters. The RTI, the Right to Information process in the state, has been completely and utterly compromised. The rejections that we get for requests that we put in, not for us, on behalf of honest Queenslanders who deserve answers. The rejections that we get are just absolutely mind-boggling. Now, the government says it values integrity. Today, on the day of the most significant report being analysed, a report into the Queensland Building and Construction Commission that's been sitting on a minister's desk for a month gets tabled in the government response so it can slurk in under the cover of darkness. Now, doesn't that tell you everything you need to know about this mob? If they valued integrity, if they valued transparency, if they really had heeded the message, wouldn't you do that in the clear light of day so that you can face the music and genuinely talk about reform? No, it's all about how it looks, it's never how it is, and it's all about their mates and it's never about Queenslanders.
Correct. Well, we know how it looks, we know how it smells, and we know what the answer is in a couple of years' time. Thank you, mate. Nice to talk to you. David Crisafulli, Opposition Leader.